Line's good.
Never on.
Whoa.
Hard. Hardly.
Come on, Brent.
Line's good.
Got real close.
I hear high, right?
Try and hit 2/3.
Have they saved it for her? Yes, they have.
Ooh, welcome to Game of Stones, everybody. I am Sean Graham Scott alongside, as always. Hello, Scott.
Oh, Sean, bud, I'm feeling strong, but also feeling sore. Just got back from the gym.
Yeah, you're getting all swole, eh?
Oof, boy. And I'll tell you what, because of a bunch of reasons, I had to do my workouts 2 days in a row this week.
Yeah.
I don't recommend it.
Why is that?
Oh man, I was huffing and puffing and my legs feel like jello right now.
That's good.
but,
That means it's working.
Yeah, I guess so. We also upped the reps today, so I was feeling maybe that contributed as well.
Potentially. Yeah, that is a thing that can happen when you really, hit it hard like that, Scott.
Yeah, but I was finding it easy at the previous level, so
We got to step
time
it
to
up.
amp it up.
Yeah, that is the key. And you know what else we're stepping up, Scott? It is the Olympic qualification process here in Canada. It is time to step it up to the next level as we have a bunch of teams that are en route to Liverpool, Nova Scotia for the actual pre-trial event, not of the pre-trials or direct entry, nothing like that. This is your regular old pre-trial event, slightly different format than what we've seen in the past. But Scott, the closer we get with every step here, it's really dawning on us that we're going to have an Olympic representative picked within 5 weeks here.
Yeah, 5 weeks. Wow, that's that is pretty incredible. It's really sneaking up on us.
It really is. Late November, just over a month from now, in Saskatoon, we will have 9 men's teams, 9 women's teams convene. Sort of interestingly enough, Scott, at the same time as the Euros are taking place.
Yeah, it's going to be a busy week, right?
It really will.
Yeah, lots of curling on TV. You know what? That I might take that week off work.
There you go. Why not, eh?
Why not? Just make sure I got all my attention focused on the trials.
Yeah. So here we go. We're gonna talk about the pre-trials here. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 14 women's teams, 14 men's teams in the field here. They're broken into pools of 7, and we will have a round robin within the pools. And Scott, let's talk about the playoff format a little just to start, because there are 2 spots available, men's and women's. 7 teams have already qualified for the trials. This is to fill in the last 2 spots. So how this is going to work is that you will play your round robin. The top 2 teams in each pool will go through to, let's say, at the A qualifier, and there will be the first place finisher will play the second place finisher from the other pool. The 2 winners will play, and that winner is in to the trials. The people who lose, so the 2 losers of that 1-2 game, they will go and play the third place finishers from each of the pools. Those 4 teams will play down, and the winner out of those 4 teams will play the loser of the A qualifying game. So essentially, Scott, how you've described it to me, which actually made a lot more sense in my head when you described it, is that the top 2 teams in each pool basically have a double knockout playoff. The third place finishers get a single knockout playoff, and that's how we will determine our 4 teams that emerge here.
That's right. And so I think that's the easiest way to think about it. We're going from 14 men's teams, 14 women's teams down to just 2. So you got to get there somehow. And it is nice to reward the teams that finish a bit higher in this, but also, there's something to still play for if you're in third place in your pool. And I think we could see like quite a log jam, maybe some ties for that last spot in the pool. So it'll be nice, a little margin for error.
Yeah, there is some margin for error there, like you say, and I think there will be space. Is there space for tiebreakers here too? So I mean, every game is really going to matter to get into those spots, but certainly an advantage to be in the top two in your pool. And looking at the four pools, nothing really stands out in terms of like a pool of death, if you will. I think that they're pretty well matched up and pretty even if you look across the pools. So I'm excited to see how this is going to go.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And I don't see any time slots allotted for tiebreakers. So we could be looking at a last stone draw or whatever they call it as
Yeah,
the as the mechanism for breaking those ties.
sure. All right, so let's we're going to go through this and go team by team, pool by pool. Hey everyone, Future Sean here. Just wanted to hop on real quick to say that the stats that we're using in this episode do not include the results from the Penticton Spiel the week after Thanksgiving. We recorded it just before that event started, so those numbers are not included, nor are the numbers from this past weekend's Grand Slam. Fortunately, only one of the teams from the Slam is participating in Liverpool. That's Jason Gunlickson's team. So the numbers for him don't include those results. So just wanted to clear that one up in case you had any questions. So back to you, Passion. Well, let's start on the women's side in pool number A. Scott, let's take this in the order that they are on the Curling Canada website, which is alphabetical. So let's start with Penny Barker, team out of Saskatchewan, a former world silver medalist. Scott, she has played in 9 provincial championships out there in Saskatchewan. She was won once in 2017. Didn't have the greatest of weeks at the Scotties. She might not be the most familiar name to folks out there. She has never played in any of the current slams. She did play in the Colonial Square 3 times when it was considered a slam, back when the women were not participating in all of the slams as we know them now. And Scott, what do her numbers look like?
So, Sean, I just threw together some real quick numbers looking at the hammer factor for each of these teams this year. Now, my caveat to that is this is an extremely small sample size. So, I don't know that we can glean that much from these, but it's a quick way to sort of say, okay, which teams might be favored
Right.
based on how they've played so far this year. So, as a reminder, hammer factor is hammer efficiency, so the rate at which you convert the hammer, minus your steel defense, which is how little you give up steals.
Sure.
So, a high number in steel defense is bad because you want it to be very low. So that's why you subtract it. Now we've got Penny Barker converting on the hammer at 33% only. It's not great. And a steel defense of 31% gives her an overall hammer factor of 0.02. Not great. What we're looking for in hammer factor is, for the women's side, it's anything above 0.28. You're going to be like a great team. So for this event, since the top teams in Canada are already sorted out of this, we're going to look for anything above 0.2 will be a pretty good hammer factor.
Okay.
And anything below 0.1, there's going to be some work to do. And I'm not very confident in that, with the caveats I gave before. So 0.02,
Right.
that's below 0.1. Not great.
Okay.
So not doing so well this year. That's the sample size of only 7 games. So take from that
Yeah.
what you will.
Yeah, so a limited sample there, but the peripherals don't look great for Penny Barker. Scott, a team where the peripherals might look a little better is Corinne Brown. She played in the pre-trials and she was unsuccessful in getting the direct entry spot for the trial. So she is here in Liverpool for the pre-trials. Kind of an interesting note that I took from the pre-trials is that out of her 6 games, she only had the last rock in 1 of those games in the first end. So not great on those last shot first end draws that draw to the button before the game. You're going to have to tighten that up because it does really make a difference in terms of winning percentage, having that last rock in the first end. Also, kind of interesting that she gave up 15 multiple score ends in that event and only had 10 herself. So you're going to want to see better execution with the hammer and not giving up those multiple ends. And I would assume, Scott, that would have an impact potentially on her hammer factor.
So she was able to convert at a pretty good rate, at 41%, 0.41, and did limit the steals. But like you say, for her, it was the multiple scores that really put them behind the 8 ball. They were able to limit the multiples to no fours against, only 12 twos and 3 threes, as you mentioned. So her hammer factor is 0.25. I feel like that's pretty good. I think this team will be sort of at the top of this pool come the end of the week based on that. And the sample size we have for her is 19 games. So a bigger sample size, maybe a little more to take from these numbers. But hammer factor 41% is pretty good.
Yeah. And she is the only team from those pre-trials who is here in this particular pool who played in that direct entry event. So she would be considered, I think, probably in the rankings, the best team here. Maybe not so much in terms of our estimation. We'll get to who that might be a little later, but just in terms of rankings, certainly the highest team here. So, but Scott, they're going to have to go through a buzzsaw this year. That's right. The team from Yellowknife. It's Carrie Galusha making her first ever appearance at a pre-trials event, first ever for a Northwest Territories team, I believe. Scott, it is a 5,936 kilometer drive from Yellowknife to Liverpool. And we'll talk about why that matters in a minute. But Scott, at the pre-trials, or at the pre-trials, she was at the pre-trials direct entry event here in Ottawa. Did not lose, ran through the field, outscoring opponents 34-21. Has had a great season so far, has won an event in Oakville, was in another final, made the playoffs at the Stu Sells Cherokeville event that took place over Thanksgiving. And so really just a very strong season so far. Joanne Rizzo playing great, throwing those 4 stones. And for as much as you don't think of Carrie Galusha as necessarily a trials team, based on how they're playing, you got to take them seriously.
Big time, Sean. Big time. 15-3 so far this team on the year, including that Olympic qualification, the pre-trials entry event. So yeah, they're feeling it. This weekend didn't end, the way they were hoping. The Stu Sells Oakville, whatever. They lost their last game, but it's a lot to build on for this team. And so they're definitely one to watch because of the hot start that they've had this fall. Looking at their numbers real quick, hammer factor is only 0.13. I think their steal defense is what's really letting them down. Their hammer efficiency is at 40%. So, they're one of these teams that's maybe not right at the top, but based on the results, you play to win the game, as they say. So can't argue with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So next on the list here in Pool A, it's Jacqueline Harrison. Her team has had a very good start to the season. They have made the playoffs in all 3 of the events they have entered thus far. All of those have been in Oakville, the Fall Classic, the Labor Day Classic, and the Stu Sells, but the Toronto version that was played in Oakville, not the Stu Sells Oakville version. And it's interesting, Scott, to look at their numbers for the year. They do have a plus 19 point differential, which you would expect given how many games they've won. But they have had 47 ends with the hammer and given up 18 stolen points, which kind of stood out to me. That seems like a lot of points to give up in that number of ends with the hammer. So how does that impact their overall numbers?
Yeah, Sean, you're bang on there. That steal defense number is only 0.3 due to all those stolen points. Like you say, you want this definitely to be below 0.2, and seeing it all the way up at 0.3 is really not ideal. Hammer efficiency is 35. It's fine. It's not anything to write home about, but because of that steal defense, it takes them to 0.05, just 5% hammer factor over those 12 games. Not great. They're going to have to limit the steals if they want to have some success at the pre-trials.
Absolutely. And so let's move on, Scott, to one of our favorites. It's Krista McCarville, her team coming down from Northern Ontario. Scott, she has come through the pre-trials twice before to qualify for the trials back in 2009 and in 2017. Had a tougher run there in 2017 here in Ottawa at the full trials. They competed in 2013 but missed the playoffs. But that was only a few months after she had announced that she was taking a step back from curling to focus on her career. Of course, she's a teacher, and her kids, the kids were of course younger then than they were now or are now. So maybe wipe out 2013 a little bit because they hadn't really been practicing all that much, but they got the invite and they went. So the fact that she's done this twice before, the fact that their whole schedule is not necessarily dominated by trying to qualify for those Olympic trials, you do wonder what that experience is like and how important that's going to be. But Scott, where do they stand as we sit here going into this event in the events that they have played this year?
Yeah, it's this is why such a small sample size is not always the best way to look at things, Sean. In their games that they've played so far with the hammer, they've given up many steals. Let's just say many steals. Their steal defense is only 0.59, which is incredibly bad. Remember I said you want it to be under 0.2.
Yeah.
0.59. You're giving up steals in 59% of the time. And that was sort of their story. I'd say they've only played 4 games on the Curling Zone website. So the statistics are really skewed. That said, their hammer efficiency wasn't great either. So they're at negative 0.34 hammer factor. And when you see somebody at negative, that's not a good sign. That said, small sample size. McCarville's done it before. I have every confidence that she's going to be able to do it again. They have a great team, and they just show up and win. So
yeah, that they do.
Knock a little rust off, and there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as you say, the start of the season has not gone well for Krista McCarville. We'll see if they can turn it around here in Liverpool. And one of the teams they'll be trying to turn it around against, Justin Murphy. Her team is coming into this event 8-8 on the season, but just an interesting factoid. They're 5-0 when they've started the game with the hammer. So you're going to be looking at that last rock draw before the game. You're going to want to have to win, or you're going to want to win those, start in that position of power, because they have demonstrated so far this year that is a huge advantage for them, and they can really take that to their advantage, convert early in the game, get that lead and play it out. Scott, does that play out with the numbers and their ability with the hammer?
I'm not sure, because their steal defense still pretty high, 0.33. Not what you want to see. I guess it helps to start with the hammer, and their hammer efficiency is 0.31, but they're still in that negative category when it comes to hammer factor, and that's really not something that you want to see.
No, it's not. So we'll have to see how they can respond, if they can turn that number around. All right, another team we have, the final team here in Pool A. It's Beth Peterson. Saw her at the Scotties last year as one of the wild card teams. Kind of an interesting fact here is that in 14 ends that she stole at the Scotties, she scored 24 points. She gave up 12 steals at the Scotty, but only gave up 13 points. So even when they're giving up steals, very good job there of limiting the damage compared to what they were able to score on steals, averaging almost a half point more per steal than they gave up on a steal. So I think that's a pretty good sign, being able to limit that damage. Now, not a great sign. She did lose 8 of the 12 last stone draws. So she was starting without the hammer. I think probably too much to be successful. But Scott, how are they doing this year in terms of their hammer and steel efficiency?
Well, doing quite well, Sean. We've got a sample size, just 11 games, but a hammer efficiency of 56. That means you're converting at least a 2 on 56% of the ends you have hammer. That's really, really incredible. And limiting the steals, 0.14. Like I said, you want to keep that under 0.2. So they're doing that, and they've got the highest hammer factor, spoiler alert, of any team on the women's side at 0.42. So this team might be, I look at them as one of the favorites in this pool based on how they're playing.
Yeah, and we certainly saw how good they were last year, getting into that championship pool as a team that nobody, I think, going into the week really expected, given that we didn't really know all that much about them. A lot more talk about people like Mackenzie Zacharias, for instance. So it'll be fun to see them out here again. So yeah, that's a good pool here. So just to wrap up Pool A, it is Penny Barker, Corinne Brown, Carrie Galusha, Jacqueline Harrison, Krista McCarville, Justin Murphy, and Beth Peterson. 3 of those teams will come through into the playoffs, where they will cross over against Pool B. And let's start with the one, the only, Sherry Anderson. She is bringing her team. Of course, Nancy Martin is going to be there as well. Get ready to see a lot of that photo on our Twitter account during this event. She is the 2-time defending world senior champion. She just goes and wins these events. It's amazing to see. She had a pretty good week at the Scotties last year, again with Nancy Martin, having a lot of fun there. Scott, how have they started off this season?
Well, the veteran of veterans, Sherry Anderson, starting off, I'd say pretty run of the mill this year at 34% on the hammer efficiency, a little high on the steel defense, 23%, 15 game sample, so a little bit bigger for them. 0.11 hammer factor. I think they'll be a team to watch just because of how good Sherry Anderson is and can be. But I would say there's other teams that have higher ceilings.
Yeah, and perhaps one of those teams is Suzanne Burt, her team from PEI. They went to the pre-trials, trying to get the direct entry to the trials. Did not play particularly well there. They lost the last rock draw in each of their 4 games that they played. They only scored 5.5 points, which is way down for Suzanne Burt. They have to be more aggressive, and Suzanne Burt has to make those last shots. I saw her play a couple games, and she was off. Like they had chances early in ends, through the middle of ends, but Suzanne herself just missed some shots, and missed those bailout shots too, when they were trying to either steal or limit damage from the other side. She was just off on that draw weight. And if Suzanne doesn't have it the way that she likes to play, it's not going to be a lot of fun for them if she's not making those draws, because she likes to mix it up. She likes to have a lot of rocks in play. But Scott, how is that translated to her numbers early in the year?
It's interesting, right? To only have scored 5.5 points per game. I'm looking back at her last 3 seasons, 2021, 2020, and 2019. And her points for per game, 9.2, 8.2, 8.8 for those 3 years. So yeah, definitely needs to pick up that scoring to regain some of that form, being more aggressive. That said, her hammer efficiency quite good in the sample we have for this year, 45%. That's what you want to see. It's very strong, and 16% steel defense, all amounting to a 0.29 or 29% hammer factor. So quite high, quite good. And as you said, this is one of the teams that dropped down from that direct entry event, and thus is higher in the rankings than some of the others. But the numbers are bearing that out too. Yeah. So one of the favorites.
Yes. So let's move on to the hometown team for this event. That's Jill Brothers. Scott, we talked that the drive time for Carrie Galusha, if she were to drive, she's not driving, but the drive distance would be 5,900 kilometers. For Jill Brothers, it's 147 kilometers drive from Halifax, just a little south and west out to Liverpool. Scott, the main thing for this team, and I noted it at the pre-trials, Kim Kelly is on the team. Kim Kelly is playing great, or at least in the games that we saw during those pre-trials. We were there when they won this berth on that Sunday morning. We saw that game. Neither team played great. If Jill herself plays the way she played that morning, it's probably not going to be a fun week for them, just because the level is going to be a little higher. Now, the ice was tough there. It had been raining all week in Ottawa. There was a leak later in the day on that same sheet. So who knows how much ice conditions played into it, because neither team was particularly good that morning. But I think this is a team where they have the ability certainly to play really well, get into the playoffs, but they also have the ability potentially to have a really long week and maybe be at the bottom of the table. Like I think this is a team that has a really big variance from being able to qualify to the trials to not getting into the playoffs.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. Looking at the numbers, 37% hammer efficiency is pretty good, but the 27% steel defense, not as good. Take those numbers and you get a 0.1 on the hammer factor, which it puts them at about a 50th in the world sort of level. That's
Right.
sort of the between 50 and 100 in the world. That's where that is. So yeah, I think this is just on the edge here. Maybe the hometown cooking will help, but they're gonna have to catch lightning in a bottle. And if with Kim Kelly there, anything's possible.
Yeah. All right. Next on the list here in Pool B on the women's side, it's Holly Duncan, a team that has gotten off to a phenomenal start this year. They are 15-5 on the year. They have won 2 events: the Stu Cells Toronto and the Stu Cells Oakville. Both played in the same place. Also made the final of the KW Fall Classic, which they lost to Carrie Galusha. So Scott, based on that 15-5 so far this year, I would think that their peripherals are looking pretty good.
Yeah, Sean, you even identified it in your show notes that we share with each other. 54% hammer efficiency. That's a number that really jumps off the page. We talked about Beth Peterson's at 56, 54, same ballpark. Really, really impressive. Steel defense, it's a little higher than I'd like to see at 0.22. But, you put those numbers together, you got a 0.32. That's very excellent and very impressive for this team. So yeah, this team could be one of the ones to watch.
Yeah, and don't forget too, Holly Duncan was in the trials in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. So I mean, she's certainly capable of getting a team there because she's done it. So don't sleep on Holly Duncan.
No, don't for sure. I think she was with. I'll look into it while we talk about the
fact
next
check
team
that.
here.
Okay, well, actually, yeah, fact check that, Scott, because she definitely played in the 2018 Scotties. She definitely skipped Ontario in the 2018 Scotties and had that tiebreak to get into the championship pool, which she won on that Thursday morning. So, but a capable player, Holly Duncan, no question about it.
Absolutely.
So another capable player, Danielle Inglis, is here. She is happy not to be in the same pool as Carrie Galusha, though. She is 0-3 against Carrie Galusha so far this year. Danielle Inglis is local to us, one of the nicest people ever to beat the hell out of us on a curling rink, Scott. But is there a conflict of interest here? She's a Curling Canada, at least contractor, if not a Curling Canada employee. I mean, do you think, they shift things around a little bit, give Danielle Inglis a little leg up?
Well, Sean, you're right that they are definitely one of the nicest teams we played, and definitely one of the nicest teams that destroyed us. But everybody destroyed us that year. that said, no, it was really fun to play against Danielle and the rest of the team. Hammer efficiency 0.33, the steel defense 0.34, puts them just into the negative territory. Not ideal. They're going to have to come up and really put together their best week to be able to come out of this event. I saw them playing at the Ontario Scotties in 2020, where they played really, really well, lost out, I think, to Holly Duncan in the semifinal, or another team in the semifinal, who then, went on to lose to Rachel Homan. But yeah, they've got great attitude there out on the ice, and hopefully they'll get a TV game. Maybe they will, as maybe she got some pull.
Yeah, maybe she got some pull. Now, the other way it could go, though, is that maybe Curling Canada rigs it against her because they want her at the trials doing all the great work she does on the back end of things with the social media and everything that she does there. Like, they could rig it the other way too.
Oh, geez, yeah, I didn't think of that. That'd be tough. That'd be tough.
Yeah, watch your back, Danielle. Make sure everything's on the level.
Yeah, make sure everything's on the up and up.
All right, the second to last team here in the pool is Darcy Robertson, who just shows up and makes playoffs, although I don't know how true that's been in the past couple of years. She did participate in the 2017 pre-trials, went 2-4 in that event. Interestingly enough, she is 0-2 against Beth Peterson so far this year. And I think when I look through their schedule, those are probably the two toughest games that they played. So overall, they haven't had the greatest start to the season. And I don't know what to expect from Darcy Robertson. Scott, do the numbers tell us anything?
Well, they tell us they're not having a great start to the season, like you just said. A negative 0.1 hammer factor, giving up a lot of steals. You never want to be in that negative territory. We've said in the past she shows up and makes playoffs. I think this is maybe where that ends.
Yeah, I think that's the likely scenario here. But again, she's good enough that if she can have that Michelle Englot type run, if we go back to the 2017 Scotties, it's possible, right? It's certainly possible.
Anything is possible.
Yeah. All right. And the
Like
last
Kevin
team.
Garnett.
Yeah, that's right. The last team in the pool here, it's Mackenzie Zacharias and her team, which we saw in the Scotties back in February. Scott, this is going to sound potentially like a very esoteric stat, but I was really taken by this when I looked up their numbers from the Scotties. So they were pretty consistent on 3 parts of their game. So intern hits, 71%, outturn hits, 72%, outturn draws, 71%. And each of those they threw between 122 and 141 times as a team. So those are remarkably consistent numbers. But they threw 207 intern draws for 80%. So not only are they throwing this particular thing better, the intern draw better than they're doing everything else, they're also throwing it at least 50% more than their next most common shot. And it seems like that is a recognition of this team that, hey, this is what we're good at. This is where our strength is. Let's do this more, because there's no logical reason why that number should be that high unless you're actively calling a game to make yourself have intern draws. And so it's rare for a young team to be so much better at draws than it hits just early on. While at the same time, it shows that, to me, that at least unconsciously, if not actually consciously, they are aware that this is a strength. The intern draw is a strength for the team, and they're trying to cater ends to get to that point to throw those shots. So it'll be fun to see. Hopefully there is a TV game with them just to see if that is the case, anecdotally in a small sample size, to watch it, while also seeing if other teams know this and try to force them away from that if they can.
Yeah. I'd like to see that sort of a strategic use of the stats come into the game for them. That would be interesting. As far as the numbers go, pretty run of the mill. Like they're at 0.1, the same number we saw for the Jill Brothers rank, same for Sherry Anderson's rank. So I think they'll be sort of in the mix for that third spot in this event, that third spot in the pool. But there is a lot of young talent there on that team. So, you could see a little bit better than that. I think the potential is there, but I would expect them in that, third, fourth, fifth area.
All right. So, Scott, those are the 14 women's teams who are in play for the 2 spots. What do you think, Scott? Let's just make one pick from each pool for who we think could get, or no, just 2 teams general, because they don't necessarily have to come out of the 2 pools. So who you got here?
Well, I'm going to pick one based on the numbers and one not.
Okay.
I think I'm picking Krista McCarville.
Yeah.
Despite those numbers there. Not the best start to the year, but she's Krista McCarville, right?
Of course.
So give me Krista McCarville, and I'm going to take the top hammer factor because I put these numbers together. I must have done it for a reason. Give me Beth Peterson.
Okay, so Beth Peterson and Krista McCarville for Scott. I'm going to just go different just to be fun, and I'm going to go with Carrie Galusha because they're on fire, and it'd be fun to see her at the trials. It'd be incredible just to see Fred there with Kevin Cooey's going to be there, and then Carrie Galusha's there, especially if she's talking about retirement. To give her that spot would be a lot of fun. And then I'm going to also go with Beth Peterson for my other spot. Oh, no, I'm not, because you did. Sorry. I'm also going to go with Mackenzie Zacharias there, the young gun to get into the trials.
Oh, wow. All right. I'd like to see how this plays out.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to the men. Again, 14 teams here competing for the 2 spots. We'll start in what is called Pool C. And again, we'll go alphabetically. So that means we're starting with Jonathan Buke and his team. Scott, they've been outscored this season 51-43. The only team in this event that has been outscored this year. And I would have to imagine that their numbers reflect this struggle.
Yeah. Another team that's below 0 in that negative territory with the hammer factor. Steel defense numbers only 33%, like 33%, too high, not good. Hammer efficiency only 27%, not what you want to see out of this team. It will note that on Curling Canada's website, this team is listed as Team Tanner Horgan.
Yes.
Tanner Horgan is playing third for this team, but Jonathan Buke has stepped in as the skip. So if you're wondering, hey, where's Buke on the on there, that's what's going on.
Yeah. Now they will be going up against Mike Fournier and his team. Scott, I think the key thing that I'm looking for is this going to be Mike Fournier's last event as a competitive curler? He has announced that he is going to retire, and if they do not make it through to the trials, that's it for Mike Fournier as competitive curling goes. And it'll be sad to see him go, but certainly well earned to not have to keep up with that grind anymore. But it is a kind of interesting subplot here that, I mean, this could be the case for some other people on this list too, that this is the last time that we'll see them in a competitive event. But Fournier is the only one, as far as I know, going into it who has made that declaration. So it's just something to watch. Will there be, if they do get eliminated, what will the reaction be in the building and just from Mike himself? So just something to keep an eye out. But they are certainly a competitive team. They can definitely make it into the playoffs. They probably should have got to the championship pool back at the Briar, just that really bad Wednesday night that Mike had. But otherwise, they would have had that spot. So I don't know. It'll be fun to see. Hopefully, they get on TV at some point.
Yeah, that'd be really fun, and it would be a good nod, to Mike Fournier, who has announced he's leaving. Like you said, that'd be nice to just get him on TV one last time.
Yeah,
because why not?
Yeah.
And
So how
as
they
far as the
started this year? Yeah.
So as far as the numbers go, I don't think these numbers are accurate. All the stats, by the way, I got from Curling Zone, but they only had a sample size of 7 games, and then underneath there was many more games that they had played. That said, it looks good on the surface, but I'm not willing to say anything about these numbers because I'm not sure that they're accurate. So I'll just say that we'll see.
Okay. All right. Now, another team that we are going to have to see about is Jason Gunlickson. They went to the Trials Direct Entry event here in Ottawa, did not have the greatest of weeks. And that kind of feeds into the thing that I've noticed about them is that, Scott, at the Briar back in March, they only won 4 of 12 last rock draws. They only won 1 of 6 at the pre-trials, which means that of their Curling Canada competitive games, they've only started with the hammer 5 of the last 18 times. That is not really good enough to have sustained success. Again, given everything we know about how important it is to have that hammer in the first end, they're going to have to pick that up. That is a real weakness of the game. And I don't know, Scott, what's their hammer efficiency like, and how much does that potentially play into it, not starting with the hammer?
So yeah, this is really strange for somebody that's as dialed into analytics as Jason is, because he values the hammer so much that you'd think that a big focus of their team would be to get that hammer in the first end and then sort of run it out, the way that they've done so often. They're decent with the hammer this year so far, 33%, but they're giving up too many steals. It's a 0.25, just too many steals. Add that on top of the hammer being in the opponent's hands to start the game, and that doesn't equal a lot of success. Just a 0.08 hammer factor.
All right, so they will have to improve that, and an opportunity to improve that will come against Jeremy Hardy and his team out of Alberta. They were first place on the 2019-20 Alberta Curling Tour rankings, and they stated unequivocally that they felt that should have qualified them to be Team Alberta at the Brier last year, citing that Cooey and Brendan Botcher would have gotten in as wildcard teams, and I absolutely loved the gusto with which they pursued that. I don't think I agreed with them, but I appreciated their candor and their effort in that regard. It was an amazing statement that they put out. This year has not got off to a great start for them. They have not qualified for the playoffs in any of their 4 events, and Scott, I would have to imagine that that is reflected in their peripheral numbers.
Yeah, Sean, just rewind what I said about Gunlickson and play it again for Team Hardy, also sitting with a 0.08 hammer factor for the year. So, yeah, like I say, we're trying to see something around 0.3 really gives us a good indication. Anything below 0.1, that's tricky. You're going to have to really capture something and buck that trend to be able to move on at this event.
Yeah, especially in this field. This is or in this pool. This is a good pool here. Because one of the other teams, the next team on the list is Vincent Roberge. This is a team we didn't know much about going into the pre-trials, but they came out guns a-blazing, go 4-0 at the pre-trials to get the A side qualifying spot. They also played in the Oakville Fall Classic this year, where they went 0-4. So which team is going to show up? The team that runs the table or the team that goes over? That's going to be kind of interesting. And is there a dynamic here where their first game or their first game really does set the stage for what their week could be? Who knows? But Scott, are we seeing the same divergence in the numbers at all?
Well, I think you're seeing the strength of those pre-trials showing up in the numbers. Hammer efficiency 41, where maybe that fall classic goes is the steel defense 25, 25.25, a little bit higher than we want. So just a 0.16 hammer factor, which is pretty good. Probably in play for middle of this pool, but like you said, there is some stiff competition here, and we're gonna have to see the 4-0 team show up if they want to get into the next playoff round.
Yes, absolutely. So let's move on then to Pat Simmons. Scott, Pat Simmons is back. What I love about them is that they are using as their logo the image of Pat Simmons with his hands in the air after the 2015 Brier shot to win the game. Like that's their logo. It's great. Absolutely love it. Playing with the younger team here, Colton Lott's going to be there, Kyle Daring, and somebody else.
The other lot.
Yeah, so it's the 2 lots and Kyle Daring here filling out that team, going with the veteran experience at the back end. Scott, how have they done this year, and what do you expect from them here in Liverpool?
They've had a pretty decent start to the year. 38% hammer efficiency, a little high on the steel defense at 20%. Gives them 0.18. They're sort of in that same category as the Roberge team. They're definitely capable, and we all know how clutch Pat Simmons can be. So it'll be about them trying to eliminate those steals that will be the key to them advancing.
All right, and rounding out this Pool C, it is Karsten Sturme, another Alberta team in the field. They have already played 27 games this year. That is a whole ton of games at this point in the season. They are 15-12 so far. They have wins over Matt Dunstone and Brendan Botcher at the Swift Current event that took place back over Thanksgiving. So some impressive wins there. But Scott, are the numbers as impressive?
Honestly, yes, they are. 27 games, the second highest number of games of the teams in this field, either men's or women's. So getting out there, playing a lot, is paying dividends. Hammer efficiency is up at 0.38, 38%. Steel defense, 0.13. Pretty good. That's pretty good. You want to be in that under 0.02 when it comes to that. So 0.25 hammer factor. Very good start to the season for this team, and I think they could be a dark horse in this pool.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen him make an Alberta final before, and had success in that event. Certainly a lot of success at the university level out of that University of Alberta program. And a guy, we haven't quite seen them a lot yet on the national stage, but that doesn't mean they're not good. They can certainly
No.
come through this pool. So again, Pool C is Jonathan Buke, Mike Fournier, Jason Gunlickson, Jeremy Hardy, Vincent Roberge, Pat Simmons, and Karsten Sturmey. That's going to be a tough one to get out of 4 or 5 teams that are probably coming in here expecting to get out, with the other 2 really hoping and thinking they have a chance. So it's going to be a real interesting situation. It's going to be really interesting to just keep a track of what happens there in
No
Pool
doubt.
C.
Sean, before
Yeah,
we
go
move
ahead.
on,
Yeah.
I just want to say Tanner Lott is the other Lott playing with Pat Simmons, who didn't want to
Okay.
give short shrift.
Right. No, that would be bad. Absolutely. All right. So let's move on to the final pool here at the pre-trials. It is pool number D. And let's start with another team from Manitoba, Braden Calvert and his team. Scott, they have gotten off to an absolute roar of a season, and they are 12-1 thus far. They lost the final of the Mother Club Fall Classic in Winnipeg. They won the Atkins Curling Supplies Classic, beating Rich Runin in the final there. So 12-1 record, but the competition level hasn't been super high if you look at the world rankings and the teams that they've played against. But winning is better than losing. And how do the numbers stack up?
The numbers stack up great, Sean. 50% hammer efficiency. That's great. We want to see at least 40% on those top level teams. 50% is really, really, really great. Also limiting the steals, just 0.17. So overall hammer factor 0.33. It's up there, and I think it's the highest one of all the men's teams at this event. So, like you say, the competition's probably not at the level that we'd like to see, but they're converting when they have the chance, preventing the steals, and that's what it takes to win curling matches. You heard it here first.
Yeah, score more points than the other team.
There you go.
Yeah, it took us 4 years to get there, but we did it.
We did it.
We cracked the code of the sport. And another team trying to crack the code, that is Pat Ferris. His team, they have a 9-6 record overall this year, but only 2-4 against teams that are in this field. They have beat Karsten Sturmey and Paul Fleming. They have lost twice to Glenn Howard and once to Sturmey and Fournier. So not a great sign that sort of at this level, their record is under 500. But Scott, what do their overall numbers look like?
Their numbers look okay. 0.39 on the hammer efficiency is quite good. Steel defense is what's letting them down at 0.26. So their overall hammer factor 0.13. It's that middle of the road that we were talking about, sort of on the ladies' side in Pool B. Could go either way, but like you say, losses already to teams in this field doesn't give me a lot of hope.
Another thing that might not give you a lot of hope for them is that Colton Flash is also in this pool. His team is here. They went to the pre-trials. They played okay in spots. They shut out Glenn Howard in a game. I saw them play against Mike McEwen in a game that really just came down to 2 shots essentially in the middle of the game. And Colton Flash just had a tough miss when he was going aggressive. I liked the call. He could have played safe and probably stolen one easily. Went for the steal for 2, ticked a guard and gave Mike McEwen a pretty straightforward shot for 2. Then put some pressure on him, and Mike did have to draw the pin to win the game. But what did concern me in looking at their numbers is that at the pre-trials they played 39 ends and they gave up 9 steals, which just feels like too many steals, almost a quarter of your ends, Scott. And then that's not even just hammer ends, that's just total ends. So what are you seeing on the peripherals there?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's too many steals. Their steal defense up at 0.24. That's too high if you're going to want to advance through this event. So that's what they'll have to work on. Their hammer efficiency, pretty good, 0.41, up where you want to see it. But it's those steals, like you say, that are really letting them down.
And so they're definitely going to have to clean that up in this field. And one of the teams they can do that against is Paul Fleming. This is, of course, Jamie Murphy's old team, who sadly announced a couple weeks ago that he is stepping away from competitive curling. And my note here is that just Nova Scotia curling just got a lot less fun.
A lot less fun. Yeah. I know I'm a Jamie Murphy. Maybe the term hater is too strong because I sort of poo-poo on his chances quite often. But no, you're right. This team got a lot less fun. The sample size of stats for this team, it's only 4 games, so I don't really think it really tells us anything other than they haven't given up a steal, which I guess is pretty good.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
Only 4 games, not much to read into it.
No, and we'll see how that goes. I mean, home team here, so that could be good for them. But at the same time, we've seen it before, and there's a few teams in this field where we've seen when they show up to a Briar, it takes them the weekend usually to figure it out in terms of the ice and how to throw. And so we'll be curious to see what the situation is here, especially when you have teams in this pool, Howard, Flash, who went to those pre-trials, Grassy as well, who have played on that arena ice already this year. So you just wonder what they've been practicing on, and do they need those 2-3 games to get into this event? And that might be too long in a 6-game round robin.
Yeah, we'll have to see how it plays out, Sean.
All right. One of the teams that we will see who it's going to play out against is Sean Grassy. This team did go to the pre-trials and get through in the final, beating JT Ryan in the last game. Scott, they played 71 ends at the pre-trials. And I find this very fascinating. Out of the 71 ends they played, the opponents blanked 14 times. He forced 17 times. He was forced 20 times and blanked twice. So out of the 71 ends he played, 53 of them were single or blanks.
Or not.
Yeah. So 1 or 0 points scored in 53 of 71 ends. So out of the 18 ends where there were multiple score, he had 9-4, 9 against. The 9-4 were all deuces, and the 9 against, 6 deuces and 3 triples given up. So you got to think, Scott, like that is a very conservative game plan. Not a lot of points on the board. He only outscored opponents 41-35 in the event. I don't think he's going to be able to play that much of a conservative game here. And the question is, can he hang with more aggressive teams? And we've seen him have success at the Manitoba Provincials, making it to playoffs, even making it into finals at times. But when the level is raised, just that extra level with more rocks in play, they haven't, when we've seen them in those games, had the precision to hang with some of those teams. So can they do it here? I'm not saying they can't, but I'm also unsure of if they can.
Yeah, that's my worry with them too, Sean. They're like you say, there's not a lot of margin for error with this. We talk about this with Jason Gudlickson, right? And the way that he plays and how there's not a lot of margin for error. So if you do end up giving up a steal, it's a lot more impactful than if you're able to also steal back. So their steal defense, not great. 0.24, 0.38 on the hammer efficiency is pretty good. But yeah, it's like you say, if the stronger opponents that are in this field penalize them more when they haven't got hammer, it's going to be a tough week for Sean Grassy. Plus, I mean, getting like 71 ends compared to that 39 ends that Colton Flash played.
Yeah.
Different events, I know, but
still,
that's a lot of curling already to have played.
Yeah.
And you got to wonder, I mean, I know it's early in the season. There's probably a lot of gas left in the tank, but that was a long event for them. This is going to be another long event. We'll see. I would say I'm not hopeful for them making the playoffs.
No, and they came through. Remember that Seaside too. They lost their first 2 games at the pre-trials and then ran the table through. And they can lose the first 2 games here and then win the next 4 and go 4-2. That'll be good enough to get something at the end of the week. But you really don't want to be in a spot where you're down 0-2 here. So you're going to want to get out of the gate a little better than they did back in Ottawa.
For sure.
Yeah. Another team that's going to want to get out of the gate better than they did in Ottawa is Glenn Howard. His team was in the direct entry event for the trials. Did not go particularly well for them. But Scott, here's a crazy thing. Glenn Howard, and I'm not going to fact check this because there's a 0% chance that it's true for anyone else. He is the only competitive curler, or the only curler in Canada to compete in every Olympic qualification cycle. He competed in the trials in 87, 97, 2001, 2005, 2009, 2013, and he was at the pre-trials in 2017. Here he is at the pre-trials again, and yeah, I'm just convinced there's nobody who competed in 87 who is here. Well, maybe Sherry Anderson, but Scott, this is just an incredible run. This is his 8th Olympic qualification cycle, and maybe it's his last. I'm not willing to bet on that, but it's Glenn Howard, and you can never count him out. But have the numbers slipped?
Yeah, not really, Sean. Glenn Howard, we know we saw this team skipped by Wayne Middaugh come into the Brier last year. Nobody thought they would do anything, and they got into that championship pool largely on the back of Tim March. If the announcers are to be believed, right? His great sweeping was able to carve some of those stones. Of course, Wayne's making great shots. Scott Howard has really become a top level third. Just a real excellent shot maker. This team is firing on all cylinders right now, and I might peg them as the favorite in this event. Yeah, Glenn's been there before, like you said, and I think that they'll, if they play their best is better than anybody else's here. Hammer efficiency on the air is 49%. That's phenomenal. Anything up near 50 is really, really top flight. Steel defense is just down at 17%, 0.17. So their hammer factor of 0.32, that's the sort of number that we want to see of the top teams in the world. Small sample size, I know, but they're playing really, really well right now.
Yeah, they've had a good run thus far, so we'll see how this goes here in Liverpool, where, they probably are at least name brand favorite here in this pool. But a team that is looking to take them down and could be the favorite 4 years from now if they're even in the pre-trials and not already in the trials. That's Tyler Tardy. This is the first run of it for Tyler Tardy going for the Olympics. Of course, they eschewed their last year of junior eligibility, just got bored of winning national championships and made the leap into the men's game. In that first year, they went 43-21 in that 2019-2020 season. What was interesting, though, is that their points per game were down by 1 point per game, and they gave up 1 point more per game as well. So even though they were winning games, around the edges, there was some slippage. But when you're still able to outscore people by 3 points a game, whereas the year before in junior, he was outscoring guys 4 points per game. So still really good, still very talented. Probably, if you look at it, that 2020 BC final against Steve Laycock, probably a big missed opportunity there. That if they won that game, they would have been there in 2021 as well. But certainly we'll see them be BC at some point, if not this year, because maybe they'll be in Beijing. Who knows? But Scott, this team is really good. And do their numbers support the expectations that at least I would have for them?
Well, yeah, I think you're right. This team is super talented. This year, they're playing okay. The hammer efficiency, 0.39. What's letting them down is the steals, which I think I've said for almost every team that's got a lower ranking in this event. That said, at 0.16, they're sitting fourth or fifth in the overall event as far as hammer factor goes. So yes, they're a young, strong team. I would pick them for the playoffs if we were picking playoffs. I don't know. I think this experience is going to be really good, and to build on for the next quadrennial, I think they'll be right there come 2026.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's why I say they might not have to play in a pre-trial in 2025 because they'll already have qualified for the trials. They are that good. So here we go. That's the 14 men's teams. Again, Pool C is Jonathan Buke, Mike Fournier, Jason Gunlickson, Jeremy Hardy, Vincent Robert, Pat Simmons, Carson Sturmey. And Pool D is Braden Calvert, Pat Ferris, Colton Flash, Paul Fleming, Sean Grassi, Glenn Howard, and Tyler Tardy. Scott, who you got as your two teams coming out on the men's side?
Well, Sean, like I did on the women's side, Well, unlike I did on the women's side, I'm going to pick the two highest hammer factors here. Give me Glenn Howard. Yeah, the experience, one last run. I think we all want to see it. So I'm picking that for as much of the story as the number, which is also pretty high.
Yeah.
And give me Braden Calvert. Two
Okay.
teams out of the D pool.
Yeah, young team
Qualifying.
there. Yeah, get that spot. I'm also going to go with the young team in Tyler Tardy. I think they can get through this and get one of those two spots. And I'm also going to go with Glenn Howard on the legacy play. Give him a nice send off, potentially in Saskatoon, there where they certainly wouldn't be favorites in that field, but that very knowledgeable curling crowd out there in Saskatchewan would certainly give him a nice ovation at the end of the week at the very least. So let's root for that.
Very good.
So there you have it. We should note that this is not all going to be on TSN. For those of you who would be looking for it on TSN, they're only going to show the playoffs. So starting on Saturday, which is October the 30th at 12:30 Eastern time, they're going to show playoff games, and then they're going to do the qualifiers. So Saturday night, the first women's qualifier, and then on Sunday, it's going to go men's qualifier in the morning, women's in the afternoon, men's at night. So only those 5 draws will be shown on TSN. Curling Canada, I believe, will be doing some streaming, so you can check it out. And do note out there that if you're not in Canada, if Curling Canada is streaming it exclusively and there's no TSN issues there, it is not geo-blocked, so you can watch it anywhere in the world. If it's a TSN thing, yeah, then it's geo-blocked. But for all those early week games, no geo-block. So do check it out. And Curling Canada does a pretty good setup, and with the curling or with the TSN equipment there too, it'll probably look very similar to what you had in Ottawa, but maybe there'd be a cameraman on the ice, maybe one for some of those draws. Who knows? But it is a pretty slick setup for a stream. So that is your broadcast availability. So Scott, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is the Elite 10 and 10 is the Olympic Games, how excited are you for the pre-trials?
Pre-trials, I'd say I'm about a 5. I think it'll be interesting. It's gonna be hard for any of these teams to win the trials.
Yeah.
Given the level of competition that's already slated to be there. But there's some young teams I'm interested in seeing. One old team, obviously, I'm interested in seeing in Glenn Howard.
Yeah.
And just sort of this is the chance to see, like I said before with Team Tardy, like what the next iteration of Canadian curling is likely to be.
I completely agree with you on that front. And a medium team too, and Kristen McCarville is always fun to see. And don't sleep on this event too. I mean, Brad Jacobs, when he won the Olympic gold medal back in 2014, it was through the 2013 pre-trials. John Morris and his team, when they made it to the final, they came through a pre-trials. So it's not like these teams are competing in this event to be cannon fodder for the 14 teams that have already qualified for the trials. So whoever comes out of this will have potentially a chance to go to the Olympics. So it's certainly worth paying attention to. It should be a very fun week out there in Liverpool. Hopefully this has really whet your appetite for all the fun and frivolity that will go on this week. And we will be alongside following it with you. So do subscribe to the show wherever it is you get your podcast. If you haven't yet, do the likes, ratings, comments, all that stuff helps us out to grow the show and beats those algorithms. And we will be following along, tweeting all sorts of fun stuff over at Game of Stones Pod, both on Twitter and Instagram. So check those out. Also over on Facebook, facebook.com/Game of Stones Podcast. You can find all of the live stream stuff that we've done, and all the episodes are there. And you can follow that page for when we do go live, as we are planning to do at some point during this curling season. Of course, you can also head on over to GameOfStonesPod.com. All of our past episodes are there, plus the merch tab with all of the proceeds, plus matching on our part going to either Food Bank Canada or the Sandra Schmerler Foundation. And if you want to let us know what you want to hear on the show or just provide some general feedback or your thoughts, GameOfStonesPodcast@gmail.com. So thanks for listening, everybody. Scott,
Sean,
it's Olympic time, buddy.
Look out. I knew this training that I was undertaking was going to pay off. So
this is why we lift all
Olympic
those weights.
season is here. That's why we lift all those weights in the off season.
Yeah. So enjoy the curling, everybody. We will be back with you next week to wrap it all up. But until then, keep those brooms on the ice and don't dump that intern.
Make the final.